Let's start with a question that sounds simple, but it really isn't. Why did Russia start this war? If we look at the big picture, not just the details, one idea comes up again and again. Vladimir Putin has repeatedly described the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. A geopolitical disaster means an event that permanently weakens a country's power and influence and security. For Putin, that collapse wasn't just history, it was humiliation. Ever since he came to power, he's been trying to reassert Russia's strength, to establish it again after losing it, to reassert Russia's strength. Not by rebuilding the Soviet Union exactly as it was, but by restoring Russia's influence and fear factor. In plain terms, Putin wants a stronger Russia. To him, strength means control. One of the key ideas driving this war is the concept of what we call a buffer zone. A buffer zone is a neutral or controlled area that separates rival powers, buffer zone. From Putin's perspective, NATO countries moving closer to Russia's borders, this feels like a threat. Ukraine, sitting right between Russia and NATO, becomes central to this threat. This is where the mindset shifts. Putin doesn't just see Ukraine as a neighboring country. In his view, large parts of it are historically Russian. When someone says, "This is mine," as Putin is doing, they're not negotiating, they are staking a claim. Russia seized Crimea years ago, and Crimea matters because it contains Russia's only warm water Black Sea naval port. This is a port that doesn't freeze in winter. Losing that port would be a strategic nightmare to Russia. As I record this, it's the 28th of December 2025. Russia controls roughly 20% of Ukrainian territory. If the fighting stopped tomorrow, those lines would remain, and that's where the uncomfortable reality sets in. From the very beginning, Ukraine declared that total victory was the only acceptable outcome. Total victory means recovering every single piece of lost territory, including Crimea and the eastern regions. But here's the harsh truth. Wanting something and being able to achieve it are often two very different things. This war has become a war of attrition. This is a phrase that means a long conflict where each side tries to exhaust the other's resources, people, and morale. In wars like this, nobody really wins, they just lose more slowly. The Ukrainian population has shown extraordinary resilience. Resilience is the ability to endure hardship without breaking. Entire cities have lived under near constant drone and missile attacks. Imagine this. In some recent months, Kyiv had only one single night without an attack. That's not just pressure, that's psychological warfare. Energy infrastructure has been destroyed, cities damaged, daily life turned into survival. Yet Ukraine continues to hold the line. This is a phrasal verb, meaning to resist without retreating. Ukraine continues to hold the line. One surprising moment came when Ukrainian forces launched a surprise incursion. This is a sudden military entry into Russia's Kursk region. For the first time since World War II, foreign troops were operating on Russian soil. This shook the Kremlin. This means it deeply disturbed or destabilized it. It shook the Kremlin. But even that moment didn't change the bigger picture. So why does NATO keep supporting Ukraine so heavily? Because geography matters. Poland sits right next door. Russian missiles have already crossed into Polish territory by mistake. And history has taught Eastern Europe a brutal lesson. When expansion goes unchecked, it rarely stops on its own. We have a saying here, an old saying, give an inch and they'll take a mile. This idiom, this saying means if you allow a small concession, someone will demand much more. Give an inch and they'll take a mile. And that fear explains NATO's mindset. They don't believe Putin would stop after Ukraine. And when leaders take someone at their word, meaning they believe what someone openly says, take someone at their word, Putin's past statements don't exactly inspire trust. This fear isn't paranoia. It's informed by history. Before World War II, many countries believed that giving Hitler just a little territory would satisfy him. Czechoslovakia was taken piece by piece. Each time, people said, that's the last demand. It never was. The United States initially followed an isolationist stance, a policy of staying out of foreign conflicts. The thinking was simple. We have oceans protecting us, so this isn't our problem. History proved otherwise. Today we have a similar debate. People are asking, why should we care? It's a fair question, but ignoring aggressive expansion can embolden leaders who are already testing limits. Ukraine's surprise move into Russia stretched its supply lines, the routes that deliver weapons, food, and fuel. When supply lines weaken, armies lose effectiveness. In military terms, that's when you've lost the plot. You've lost control of the situation. You've lost the plot. And Russia, meanwhile, has responded by massing tens of thousands of troops, including soldiers from North Korea. Why North Korea? Because Putin doesn't want another conscription. Conscription is forcing ordinary citizens into military service. That move would be wildly, very unpopular at home. Instead, North Korean troops serve as what we call cannon fodder. This is a brutal term, meaning soldiers treated as expendable. In return, North Korea gains money and combat experience and weapons technology. It's a grim transaction, but war often is. At some point, this war won't end with a victory. It will end with negotiation. A negotiated settlement means both sides agree to stop fighting, even though neither gets everything they want. That's a negotiated settlement. And that outcome will feel deeply unsatisfying, emotionally disappointing, deeply unsatisfying, especially to those who believed Ukraine would reclaim all its land. That's the likely scenario. Borders will probably close to pre-war lines, some Russian-held territory remaining, and maybe a demilitarized buffer zone. This is an area where military forces are restricted, a demilitarized buffer zone, possibly overseen by UN peacekeepers. Russia will almost certainly demand that Ukraine never join NATO. How NATO responds to that demand remains one of the biggest unanswered questions. Nothing happens in a bubble. That's an idiom, meaning events don't occur in isolation. China is watching closely. Taiwan is watching closely. Every response sets a precedent, an example that influences future decisions, sets a precedent. If aggression is rewarded, others may follow the same playbook. This war isn't just about Ukraine. It's about the rules of the global system and whether they still matter. The key vocabulary here, defined in context. A geopolitical disaster. This is a major event that weakens a country's global power. A buffer zone? This is just a neutral or controlled area separating rival powers. You heard war of attrition. This is a long conflict aimed at exhausting the enemy. Resilience? The ability to endure, to put up with hardship, resilience. An incursion, a sudden military entry. Supply lines, these are routes that provide resources to an army or a company. Conscription, this is forced military service, obligatory military service. Cannon fodder, soldiers treated as expendable. A negotiated settlement is an agreed end to conflict without total victory. And a demilitarized zone. This is an area where military forces are restricted. A few phrasal verbs we used. Look at the bigger picture. This is like zooming out, not looking at the details. Look at the bigger picture. Hold the line. Resist without retreating. Hold the line. When you take someone at their word, you believe what someone says. To lose the plot, this is to lose control or clarity. To stay in the game, this just means to remain involved. The idioms and sayings from this: give an inch, take a mile. We often use this to say small concessions lead to bigger demands. If you give them an inch, they will take a mile. Nothing happens in a bubble means that events affect each other. And if we say someone has lost the plot, this means they've lost direction or control. And that's everything for this episode. Thank you for listening. This is Listen. Please share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, bye-bye for now.